When my family uninvited me from New Year's Eve dinner because I was too successful now, I thought it was just jealousy. 3 hours later, I discovered why they really wanted me gone. The family trust fund I never knew existed had been drained by my own siblings, and tonight was supposed to be their celebration of getting away with it. But they made one fatal mistake, underestimating what Savannah Reed becomes when you betray her trust and steal her inheritance. Before we dive into this wild family revenge story, let me ask, where are you watching from tonight? If this family drama hits different, smash that like button and subscribe for more Justice Served stories. Trust me, what happens next will blow your mind. So grab some snacks because this New Year's Eve revenge tale is about to get absolutely insane. The text came from my sister Madison at 4:30 on New Year's Eve afternoon. Hey, Sav, change of plans for tonight. We decided to keep it small this year. Just immediate family. You understand, right? I stared at my phone in disbelief. Immediate family, I was literally their sister. But apparently, since I had started my consulting firm and bought the downtown loft, I was suddenly too much for their cozy family gatherings. The message was clear. Success made them uncomfortable. My brother Tyler followed up 20 minutes later with his own version. Sorry, sis, Mom thinks your new lifestyle might make everyone feel awkward. You know how she gets about showing off? Showing off, I had worked 80-hour weeks for 2 years, building my business from nothing. Every designer handbag, every nice dinner, every piece of furniture in my apartment, I earned it myself. But somehow my success was now a problem for the same family who used to complain I would never amount to anything. I poured myself a glass of wine and settled into my leather couch, trying to process this rejection. Fine. If they wanted to exclude me, I would spend New Year's Eve alone with Netflix and takeout. At least my apartment had a better view than their suburban dining room anyway. That was when the call came from Marcus Wellington, the family attorney I had never heard of before today. Miss Reed, this is somewhat unusual, but I need to speak with you urgently about your grandmother's trust fund. Are you available to come to my office immediately? What trust fund? I think you have the wrong person. Your grandmother, Dorothy Reed, established a substantial trust for her grandchildren in 1995. According to my records, you should have been notified of your inheritance rights when you turned 25. That was 3 years ago. My wine glass nearly slipped from my hand. Sir, I never received any notification about any trust fund. That is extremely concerning, Miss Reed. The trust contained approximately $2.8 million distributed equally among Dorothy's 4 grandchildren. Your portion should have been accessible to you for the past 3 years. $2.8 million, $700,000, that should have been mine. While I was eating ramen noodles in my studio apartment, working multiple jobs to pay for business school, there was money sitting in an account with my name on it. Who were the other beneficiaries? Your siblings, Madison, Tyler, and your cousin Jeremy. The interesting thing, Miss Reed, is that 3 of the 4 accounts have been completely emptied over the past 18 months. Only yours remains untouched, because the withdrawals required your signature, which we obviously never received. My hands started shaking. What kind of withdrawals? Large sums. Madison withdrew her full amount in 6 installments starting last January. Tyler took his in 3 lump payments. Jeremy cleaned out his account in February. But here is where it gets complicated. There were additional transactions that should not have been possible. I set down my wine and grabbed a pen. What kind of additional transactions? Transfers from your account, Miss Reed. Someone has been moving money from your inheritance to cover what appears to be investment losses and gambling debts. The signatures on file do not match any samples I have from you, which means we are looking at fraud. The room started spinning. How much did they take from my account? $430,000, stolen over the course of 14 months. I thought about Madison's new Mercedes, Tyler's sudden ability to quit his job and start his photography business, Jeremy's expensive wedding last summer, that seemed far beyond his teacher's salary. I thought about their casual dismissal of my hard work, their eye rolls when I talked about my business struggles, their constant subtle digs about how I was trying too hard. They had been living off my stolen inheritance while watching me struggle, and apparently tonight's New Year's Eve dinner was their celebration of getting away with it. Mr. Wellington, what are my legal options? Criminal charges for fraud and embezzlement would be appropriate. I also recommend freezing all remaining accounts immediately and pursuing civil recovery. Miss Reed, this level of family financial betrayal often involves more than just the immediate thefts. In my experience, there are usually additional crimes that come to light during investigation. Additional crimes: document forgery, identity theft, tax evasion on unreported transfers. These cases tend to unravel quickly once we start pulling threads. I would also recommend examining any other family financial arrangements you might be involved in. Joint accounts, co-signed loans, shared credit cards. My stomach dropped. I had co-signed a loan for Tyler's camera equipment 2 years ago. Madison had briefly been added to my credit card account to help build her credit. They had access to financial documents, bank statements, tax information. Mr. Wellington, can you meet me tomorrow morning? I need to understand exactly how deep this goes. Of course. Miss Reed, one more thing. In cases like this, the perpetrators often become hostile when confronted. I recommend gathering evidence quietly before making any accusations. These family theft cases can become dangerous if not handled properly. I hung up the phone and looked around my apartment, the apartment I had furnished with payment plan furniture because I could not afford to buy anything outright. The apartment where I had eaten cereal for dinner more times than I could count, because groceries were a luxury I could not always afford. While my siblings were spending my inheritance money, they were also systematically pushing me out of the family, making me feel like the problem, making me feel like my ambition and success were character flaws instead of achievements. But the worst part was not the money. The worst part was that they had watched me struggle and chose to let me suffer rather than tell me the truth. They had turned family dinners into opportunities to make me feel guilty for wanting more out of life, all while literally stealing my financial future. I opened my laptop and started taking screenshots of every text message, every email, every social media post that showed their sudden lifestyle improvements. Madison's vacation photos from Europe, Tyler's professional photography equipment, Jeremy's wedding registry filled with items that cost more than my monthly rent. The New Year's Eve dinner I was uninvited to. It was not about my success making them uncomfortable. It was about celebrating the final transfer of my stolen money, and they did not want me there to accidentally overhear the details of their crimes. But they made one crucial mistake. They assumed I would never find out. By 9 a.m. the next morning, I was sitting in Marcus Wellington's office with a stack of evidence and a burning need for answers. What I discovered over the next 2 hours changed everything I thought I knew about my family. Miss Reed, this is far worse than I initially understood, Marcus said, spreading documents across his mahogany desk. Your siblings did not just steal your inheritance. They have been systematically defrauding the family estate for years. He handed me a thick file. After you called yesterday, I pulled all the estate records. Your grandmother's trust was just the beginning. There was also a life insurance payout from your grandfather's death 5 years ago. $600,000 that was supposed to be distributed to all grandchildren. I never got anything from Grandpa's insurance. Because your parents told the insurance company you had moved and left no forwarding address. The money was redistributed to Madison, Tyler, and Jeremy. They forged documents claiming you had abandoned your claim. My hands clenched into fists. They told the insurance company I was missing. It gets worse. There is a college fund your grandparents established that was specifically designated for your graduate school education. $50,000 that was transferred to Tyler's business account 3 months before you started your MBA program. I remembered working 3 jobs during business school. I remembered the stress of student loans the nights I stayed up until 3 a.m. writing papers because I had to work double shifts to pay rent. Meanwhile, my college fund was paying for Tyler's photography equipment. Marcus, I need you to explain something to me. Yesterday, Madison texted me that I was uninvited from New Year's Eve because my success made everyone uncomfortable. But if they have been stealing from me for years, why would they care about my consulting business? Marcus pulled out another document. Because your business success means you now have access to resources that could expose their crimes. They needed to isolate you from the family before you started asking questions about finances. He showed me bank statements that made my stomach turn. The trust fund thefts accelerated dramatically after you started your consulting firm. They were racing to empty the accounts before you became financially sophisticated enough to audit family finances. So they were not jealous of my success. They were terrified of it. Exactly. And Miss Reed, there is something else. I found evidence that they have been intercepting your mail for years. Legal notices, bank statements, insurance documents, anything that might alert you to these financial accounts. He handed me a folder full of photocopied envelopes. All addressed to me, all opened and resealed, some dating back 6 years. They have been stealing your identity and your correspondence. This is not just embezzlement anymore. This is a coordinated conspiracy that involves mail fraud, identity theft, and document forgery. I stared at the evidence of years of betrayal. Every family gathering where they acted like loving siblings. Every time they criticized my ambition or made me feel guilty for wanting financial independence. Every moment they comforted me when I struggled financially, knowing they were the reason for my struggles. What is my next step, Marcus? We file criminal charges today. Federal charges for mail fraud, state charges for embezzlement and identity theft. I also recommend freezing any accounts they have access to and documenting any retaliation they attempt. Retaliation. Miss Reed, your family has been running a sophisticated criminal operation for years. When people like this get exposed, they do not go quietly. They will try to discredit you, turn other family members against you, and possibly attempt to destroy evidence. I thought about last night's text messages. The sudden urgency to exclude me from family events. The timing was not coincidental. Marcus, I think they know I am getting close to finding out. What makes you say that? I showed him the New Year's Eve texts. This is not about my success making them uncomfortable. They were planning something last night that they did not want me to witness. Marcus examined the messages. Miss Reed, what time did you receive these texts? 4:30 and 5:15 p.m. The final transfer from your trust account happened at 4:45 p.m. yesterday. They were literally stealing from you while they were uninviting you from dinner. The audacity was breathtaking. They had spent New Year's Eve celebrating the completion of their theft while making me feel like the problem child who did not deserve to be included. Marcus, I want to file charges today. But I also want to understand how deep this conspiracy goes. Who else in my family knew? Based on these documents, I believe your parents were involved. The insurance fraud required their signatures. The mail interception needed their cooperation. Miss Reed, I think your entire immediate family has been working together to steal from you. I felt like I was learning about strangers instead of the people who raised me. How is that possible? How do you steal from your own daughter for years and then sit across from her at Christmas dinner? Financial abuse within families often involves extensive psychological manipulation. They convinced you that your financial struggles were your fault, that your ambition was excessive, that your success was somehow problematic. This kept you from asking questions about money. Marcus was right. I had internalized their criticism. I thought I was the family member with unrealistic expectations. I thought my desire for financial independence was selfish. What they did not expect, Marcus continued, was that you would become successful enough to afford legal representation. They assumed you would always be too financially stressed to investigate family finances. But I built my consulting firm specifically because I was tired of financial stress. Which is exactly why they panicked. Your business success meant you were becoming the kind of person who audits bank statements and asks questions about inheritance. They needed to discredit you and isolate you before you uncovered their crimes. I looked at the evidence spread across Marcus's desk. Years of theft, years of lies, years of watching me struggle while they lived off my stolen money. Marcus, when we file these charges, what happens to them? Federal embezzlement charges carry up to 20 years in prison. Mail fraud adds another 20 years. Identity theft is 5 years minimum. Miss Reed, your siblings are looking at decades in federal prison. And my parents, if they were complicit in the insurance fraud, they face the same penalties. Conspiracy charges apply to everyone involved. I thought about Madison's upcoming wedding, Tyler's photography business, Jeremy's new house. None of it was built on their own success. It was all built on my stolen inheritance. Marcus, I need you to file every possible charge. I want them to understand that stealing from family has consequences. Miss Reed, there is one more thing you should know. When families commit financial crimes this extensive, there are often additional victims. Other relatives, family friends, business partners. As this case develops, we may discover that you were not their only target. What do you mean? People who steal from family members rarely stop at one victim. They typically have multiple schemes running simultaneously. I recommend that we contact other family members to see if they have experienced similar financial irregularities. The scope of their betrayal kept expanding. It was not just about my inheritance. It was about a pattern of criminal behavior that had probably been going on for years. Marcus filed the charges. All of them. I want my family to understand that their criminal enterprise is over. As I signed the legal documents that would destroy my siblings' lives, I thought about last night's New Year's Eve dinner. They were probably toasting their success, celebrating the completion of their theft-making jokes about their uptight sister who cared too much about money. But in 12 hours, federal agents would be knocking on their doors with arrest warrants. The family that cut me out of New Year's Eve was about to discover that Savannah Reed fights back. The first arrest happened on January 2nd at 6:15 a.m. I was not there to see it, but my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, called me immediately. "Savannah, honey, there are federal agents at Madison's house. They just put her in handcuffs and took her away." I was sitting in my office preparing for a client meeting when the call came. Despite everything they had done to me, seeing my sister arrested felt surreal. "Are you sure it was federal agents? Black SUVs, official badges, the works." Her husband looked absolutely terrified. They spent 3 hours searching the house and took boxes of documents. Tyler was arrested at his photography studio 2 hours later. Jeremy got picked up at the high school where he taught. By noon, all 3 of my siblings were in federal custody on charges of mail fraud, embezzlement, identity theft, and conspiracy. But the arrests were just the beginning. What I discovered over the next few days changed my understanding of my family completely. The phone call that changed everything came from my Aunt Rebecca, my father's sister, who lived across the country. "Savannah, is it true about Madison and Tyler?" "Aunt Rebecca, how did you hear about the arrests?" "Because the FBI contacted me this morning. Apparently, I am a victim too." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" "Your father has been stealing from me for 15 years. He convinced me to give him power of attorney over my retirement accounts when Uncle Jim died. He told me he was investing the money for me, but he has been moving it to accounts controlled by your siblings. $240,000. That was what my father had stolen from his grieving sister over the course of 15 years, telling her he was helping her manage her finances while he was actually funding my siblings' lifestyle." "Aunt Rebecca, I had no idea." "I know you did not, sweetheart. The FBI agent explained that you are the one who exposed the whole operation. Savannah, there are other victims. Your cousin Patricia in Denver, your great-aunt Helen in Florida. The FBI thinks your family has been running financial scams for decades." The more victims the FBI found, the clearer the pattern became. My family targeted relatives who were grieving elderly or financially inexperienced. They offered to help manage money, then systematically stole it while maintaining the facade of caring family members. I was not just a victim. I was the variable they had not planned for. The family member who became successful enough to fight back. Marcus called me 3 days after the arrests with an update that made my head spin. Miss Reed, the federal investigation has uncovered 17 separate victims within your extended family. The total amount stolen is approaching $4 million. $4 million. Your immediate family has been operating a multi-generational theft ring. It started with your grandfather's estate 20 years ago and continued with every family death, divorce, or financial crisis. They specifically targeted vulnerable relatives. The FBI had found evidence of forged wills, stolen life insurance payouts, embezzled inheritance funds, and fraudulent investment schemes stretching back 2 decades. My parents, my siblings, even my grandmother had been involved in systematically stealing from their own relatives. Marcus, how did they get away with this for so long? Because they were stealing from family members who trusted them completely, who questions their brother when he offers to help manage an inheritance, who audits their daughter when she volunteers to handle estate paperwork. But why me? Why did they target me so aggressively? Because you were supposed to be their retirement plan. Your inheritance was the largest single payout they had access to. But when you became successful independently, you represented a threat to their entire operation. That was when Rebecca suggested something that changed the entire trajectory of the case. Savannah, the other victims want to meet with you. We want to coordinate our legal responses and make sure these criminals face maximum consequences for what they have done to this family. The meeting happened the following Saturday in my downtown loft. What I expected to be a small gathering of confused relatives turned into a room full of 17 people who had been systematically victimized by my immediate family. Patricia from Denver brought bank statements showing how my father had convinced her to invest her divorce settlement with him, then moved the money to accounts he controlled. Helen from Florida had documentation of how my mother had stolen her late husband's life insurance payout by claiming to help with paperwork. My cousin David showed evidence that Tyler had been using his Social Security number to open credit cards. They are not just thieves, Patricia said, spreading documents across my dining table. They are sophisticated criminals who have been preying on their own family for decades. Helen, who was 83 years old, started crying as she described how my parents had visited her every month for 10 years, bringing homemade cookies and asking about her finances, all while slowly draining her retirement accounts. I trusted them completely. They were family. When Robert offered to help me manage my money after your uncle died, I thought he was being generous. David slammed his fist on the table. They stole my identity when I was deployed in Afghanistan. Tyler opened credit cards in my name while I was serving overseas and could not monitor my credit reports. As each victim shared their story, the scope of my family's criminal enterprise became clear. This was not opportunistic theft. This was organized crime with a 20-year timeline and multiple ongoing schemes. We need to coordinate our legal strategies, Rebecca said. If we present a unified case, the federal prosecutors will have no choice but to pursue maximum sentences. That was when I realized something that changed my perspective on everything. These people were not just fellow victims. They were becoming my real family. I have been thinking about something, I said to the group. My immediate family spent years making me feel guilty for wanting financial success, making me feel like my ambition was selfish or excessive. But they were only able to do that because they isolated me from all of you. Patricia nodded. They kept us separated deliberately. I had not talked to you in 15 years, Savannah. Every time I asked your father about you, he said you were too busy with work to stay in touch with family. They told me you had moved and did not want contact with the extended family, Helen added. They controlled all the information flow between family members. The isolation had been intentional. By keeping their victims separated, they prevented us from comparing experiences or sharing financial information that might expose their crimes. "We are stronger together than they ever expected us to be," Rebecca said. "They thought they could pick us off one by one. They did not plan for us to unite against them." Over the next 2 weeks, our coalition of victims became an investigative force that impressed even the federal agents working the case. We shared evidence, cross-referenced timelines, and discovered connections between seemingly unrelated financial crimes spanning 2 decades. David, who had military investigative training, helped us organize evidence chronologically. Patricia, who was a forensic accountant, analyzed bank statements and identified patterns of theft. Helen provided historical context about family finances that helped establish the full timeline of criminal activity. But the most important thing we discovered was how to be a real family. We started having weekly dinners, not to discuss the case, but to actually get to know each other. We shared stories, celebrated successes, and supported each other through the emotional trauma of discovering that our trusted relatives were criminals. "You know what the irony is," Rebecca said during one of our dinners. "They stole our money, but they gave us something more valuable. They gave us each other." For the first time in my adult life, I felt like I belonged to a family that celebrated my success instead of resenting it. A family that supported my ambitions instead of making me feel guilty for having them. But our coalition was about to face its first major test. The call came from Marcus on a Tuesday morning. "Miss Reed, we have a problem. Someone is trying to intimidate the witnesses." "What kind of intimidation?" I asked Marcus, my stomach dropping as I watched the morning news from my office. "Anonymous letters sent to Patricia, Helen, and David, threatening legal action if they continue cooperating with federal investigators. The letters claim they are participating in a malicious prosecution against innocent family members." I felt sick. "Do we know who sent them?" The letters were postmarked from different cities, but they all contain information that only someone close to our investigation would know. "Miss Reed, I believe someone in your victim coalition is feeding information to your family's defense attorneys." The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. After weeks of building trust, sharing evidence, and forming what felt like a real family, someone had been working against us from the inside. "Marcus, who has access to all our case information. Everyone who attended your Saturday meetings, 17 people who know the details of our legal strategy, the evidence we have collected, and the identities of vulnerable witnesses." I thought about Helen, 83 years old, and terrified of legal proceedings. Patricia, who had trusted my father with her divorce settlement. David, who was dealing with deployment-related PTSD while trying to rebuild his stolen credit. These people were already traumatized by financial abuse, and now someone was threatening them into silence. "I need to find out who the traitor is." "Miss Reed, I recommend extreme caution. If someone in your group is collaborating with the defense, they might also be reporting your activities to your family members who are currently out on bail." That was when I realized something terrifying. Tyler and Jeremy had been released on bond 3 days ago. Madison was still in custody because of flight risk concerns, but my father had posted bail for the other 2. They were free, angry, and desperate. The first sign of retaliation came that afternoon. My business website was hacked, replaced with a page claiming I was a vindictive daughter who was falsely accusing innocent family members of crimes they never committed. The page included my personal phone number and home address, encouraging people to contact me directly about my malicious lies. My phone started ringing immediately. Angry strangers calling to tell me I was a terrible daughter. People showing up at my office building demanding to speak with me about family loyalty. Someone threw a brick through my apartment window with a note attached, "Blood is thicker than water. Drop the charges." "This is coordinated harassment," Marcus explained during an emergency meeting. "Your family's defense team is running a public relations campaign designed to discredit you and intimidate other witnesses into staying quiet." But the worst betrayal was still coming. Rebecca called me that evening, her voice shaking with emotion. "Savannah, I need to tell you something. and you are not going to like it. What happened? David has been secretly recording our coalition meetings. He has been passing information to Jeremy's defense attorney in exchange for money. I felt like the world was collapsing around me. David, who had helped us organize evidence. David, who had shared stories about identity theft while he was deployed overseas. David, who I had started to think of as the big brother I never had. Are you sure? Patricia found the recording equipment in his briefcase during our last meeting. When we confronted him, he admitted everything. Jeremy offered him $50,000 to sabotage our case from the inside. $50,000 that came from my stolen inheritance money, I said bitterly. It gets worse, Savannah. David told Jeremy's lawyer about Helen's memory issues, Patricia's anxiety attacks, and your business vulnerabilities. They have been using our private conversations to plan their defense strategy. I thought about all the personal information I had shared with David, my fears about the legal process, my financial concerns about losing business clients, my emotional struggles with family betrayal. He had been packaging my vulnerabilities and selling them to my enemies. Rebecca, what does this mean for our case? Marcus thinks the defense will use David's recordings to claim that we coordinated our stories and fabricated evidence. They will argue that you manipulated vulnerable elderly relatives into making false accusations. The beautiful coalition we had built was crumbling. Helen was too scared to continue participating after receiving threatening letters. Patricia was considering dropping her charges to avoid the stress of a public trial. 3 other victims had already withdrawn from the case entirely. David destroyed our momentum, Rebecca said. The defense attorneys now know exactly which witnesses are vulnerable and how to pressure them into backing down. That night, I sat in my vandalized apartment looking at the brick that had shattered my living room window and wondered if I had made a terrible mistake. Maybe I should have just accepted the theft and moved on with my life. Maybe fighting back was causing more harm than good. The phone call that changed everything came at 11:30 p.m. Miss Reed, this is Agent Sarah Coleman with the FBI Financial Crimes Unit. I need to meet with you immediately. Agent Coleman, is this about David's betrayal? No, Miss Reed. This is about something much bigger. We found additional evidence that changes everything about this case. Can you meet me at your attorney's office in 1 hour? I looked around my destroyed apartment, thought about my traumatized witnesses, and considered the possibility that my family's criminal enterprise was even worse than we had discovered. Agent Coleman, what kind of additional evidence? Evidence that David was not just working for your brother's defense team. Evidence that your family's criminal operation extends far beyond financial theft. Miss Reed, we believe your relatives have been involved in organized crime for decades, and you accidentally exposed something much larger than inheritance fraud. As I drove to Marcus's office at midnight, I realized that my family's attempt to intimidate and discredit me had backfired in a way they never anticipated. Their desperate retaliation had attracted federal attention that revealed the true scope of their criminal enterprise. David's betrayal had hurt our witness coalition, but it had also led investigators to discover evidence that would ultimately destroy my family completely. The game was about to change in ways none of us had anticipated. Agent Coleman spread photographs across Marcus's conference table at 12:45 a.m. and I immediately understood why this meeting could not wait until morning. Miss Reed, your family is not just stealing from relatives. They are laundering money for organized crime syndicates, and your inheritance fraud case accidentally exposed a multi-state criminal operation. The photographs showed bank transfers, shell companies, and financial records that connected my family to drug trafficking, illegal gambling, and human trafficking operations across 6 states. This started when we analyzed the bank accounts your brother Tyler used to deposit your stolen inheritance money. The accounts were also receiving large cash deposits from sources that had nothing to do with his photography business. Marcus leaned forward. What kind of sources? Nightclubs that are fronts for prostitution rings, restaurants that launder drug money, construction companies that exist only on paper. Your family has been providing financial services to criminal organizations for at least 10 years. I stared at the evidence, trying to process what Agent Coleman was telling me. My family are money launderers. Your father is the operations financial coordinator. Your siblings provide the legitimate business fronts. Your mother handles document forgery and identity theft. Miss Reed, your inheritance theft was just one small part of a criminal enterprise that processes millions of dollars annually. Agent Coleman showed me surveillance photos of Tyler meeting with known drug dealers, Madison receiving cash payments at locations connected to human trafficking, Jeremy using his teacher credentials to recruit vulnerable students for criminal activities. The beautiful irony, Agent Coleman continued, is that your family's attempt to steal from you led us to discover all of this. When we investigated your trust fund theft, we found the money trail that exposed their entire operation. But how is this possible? They are suburban parents and young professionals. Perfect cover identities. Who suspects a high school teacher of laundering drug money? Who questions a photographer's cash business? Your family built the ideal facade for organized crime. Marcus was taking notes frantically. Agent Coleman, how does this affect Savannah's case? It transforms everything. Your inheritance theft is now evidence in a federal organized crime investigation. Instead of facing embezzlement charges, your family is looking at racketeering, money laundering, and conspiracy charges that carry life sentences. That was when Agent Coleman introduced me to someone who would change the entire trajectory of the case. Miss Reed, I want you to meet Detective Lisa Morales. She has been investigating your family's criminal activities for 3 years. Detective Morales was a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who looked like she had seen everything twice. Miss Savannah, your family killed my investigation 3 years ago when they discovered I was getting close to exposing them. What do you mean? I was investigating money laundering at nightclubs in the downtown area. The financial trail led to accounts controlled by your father, but before I could build a case, my investigation was shut down. Detective Morales opened a thick file. Someone with connections to your family contacted my department and claimed I was conducting an illegal investigation based on false information. My superior ordered me to drop the case. But you kept investigating anyway. On my own time, using my own resources. Miss Savannah, your family has been using their connections to corrupt law enforcement investigations for years. They have contacts in police departments, prosecutor offices, and federal agencies. Agent Coleman nodded, which is why David's betrayal was actually helpful to our case. When he started feeding information to your family's defense attorneys, we were able to monitor those communications and identify the corrupt officials who have been protecting your family's criminal operation. I felt like Alice falling down the rabbit hole. You used David's betrayal to expose police corruption. Your family's response to your inheritance case revealed their entire network of criminal contacts. Every time they tried to intimidate a witness or interfere with the investigation, they exposed another corrupt official or criminal associate. Detective Morales smiled for the first time since I had met her. Miss Savannah, your courage in filing those initial charges started a chain reaction that is dismantling a criminal organization that has been operating for decades. But our witness coalition is falling apart. People are scared, intimidated, backing out of the case. Which is exactly what we need them to think, Agent Coleman said. We want your family to believe they are winning. It makes them careless. She showed me a folder marked Confidential Operations. While your family was focused on intimidating your elderly relatives, we were conducting surveillance that captured evidence of active money laundering, drug distribution, and human trafficking operations. The evidence was overwhelming. Video surveillance of my siblings conducting criminal transactions, audio recordings of my parents coordinating with organized crime figures, financial records showing millions of dollars in illegal transfers. Miss Reed, we have enough evidence to convict your entire family on federal organized crime charges, but we need you to continue pretending that your case is weak and your witnesses are intimidated. Why? Because your family is planning something desperate. When criminals think they are about to get away with their crimes, They often attempt to eliminate evidence and witnesses. We need them to make that move so we can catch them in the act. Detective Morales leaned forward. Miss Savannah, we believe your family is planning to flee the country. Tyler has been researching non-extradition countries. Madison has been transferring money to offshore accounts. They think they can escape justice if they run. Let me understand this correctly. You want me to act like I am losing the case so my family will attempt to flee and then you arrest them? Exactly, but Miss Reed, there is significant risk involved. If your family believes you are still a threat, they might attempt to harm you before they run. Agent Coleman handed me a small device. This is a panic button connected directly to our surveillance team. If you feel threatened in any way, press this button and federal agents will respond within minutes. I looked at the evidence of my family's extensive criminal operation. The inheritance theft that had seemed so devastating was actually the smallest crime they had committed. They were not just thieves. They were sophisticated criminals who had built an empire on other people's suffering. Agent Coleman, when you arrest them, what happens to all the money they stole? Full asset forfeiture. Every account, every property, every asset purchased with criminal proceeds gets seized by the federal government. Then victim restitution is calculated and distributed. Detective Morales smiled. Miss Savannah, your family's criminal enterprise is about to become the source of the largest victim compensation fund in state history. Every person they stole from will receive full restitution plus penalties. But first, we need to let them think they are getting away with it. As I drove home at 3 a.m., I realized that my role in this case had completely changed. I was no longer just a victim seeking justice for inheritance theft. I was now an undercover operative helping to bring down an organized crime family that happened to share my DNA. The family that had tried to destroy me was about to discover that Savannah Reed had become their worst nightmare, a determined woman with federal law enforcement backing her up. The final takedown happened on Valentine's Day, exactly 6 weeks after my family had uninvited me from New Year's Eve dinner. The irony was not lost on me, that their empire would collapse on a day supposedly about love and family bonds. I was in my office when Agent Coleman called at 6 a.m. Miss Reed, it is happening now. Your family attempted to flee the country 3 hours ago. We arrested them at the airport with $2 million in cash and false identification documents. Through my office window, I could see news helicopters circling downtown. Agent Coleman, is it over? The arrests are complete. Tyler, Madison, Jeremy, and both your parents are in federal custody. We also arrested 14 associate criminals and 12 corrupt officials who were protecting their operation. The news coverage was immediate and brutal. By noon, every major news outlet was running stories about the suburban family that had operated a multi-million-dollar criminal enterprise while maintaining the facade of normal middle-class lives. The financial scope of their crimes was staggering. Over the course of 20 years, my family had stolen $17 million from relatives, laundered $43 million for organized crime syndicates, and corrupted law enforcement investigations that could have prevented dozens of other crimes. Marcus called me with updates throughout the day. Miss Reed, the asset seizure is complete. The federal government has frozen every account, seized every property, and impounded every asset purchased with criminal proceeds. What about victim restitution? Every victim will receive full compensation plus interest and penalties. The seized assets are worth more than enough to cover all restitution claims. But the most satisfying moment came when Detective Morales called with the final tally of charges filed against my family. Miss Savannah, your father is facing life in prison without parole for racketeering, money laundering, and continuing criminal enterprise. Your mother received 45 years for document forgery, identity theft, and conspiracy. Tyler and Madison are looking at 30 years each. Jeremy received 25 years. And David's cooperation was actually helpful once we understood he was working for us unknowingly. His recorded conversations provided evidence of criminal conspiracy. He received immunity in exchange for testifying against his handlers. The trials took place over the following 8 months, and the convictions were swift and decisive. My family's defense strategy collapsed when federal prosecutors presented evidence of their extensive criminal operation. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all charges. But the most meaningful victory was not legal. It was personal. The victim coalition that my family had tried to destroy became stronger than ever. Without the fear of intimidation, 17 family members came forward to share their experiences and support each other through the legal process. Rebecca became the unofficial family matriarch, organizing monthly dinners where we celebrated our chosen family bonds. Patricia used her forensic accounting skills to help other financial crime victims. Helen started a support group for elderly people who had been targeted by family members. David channeled his military training into advocating for veterans who had experienced identity theft during deployment. "You know what the most beautiful part of this is?" Rebecca said during our first post-trial family dinner. "They tried to use our love and trust against us, but they ended up teaching us what real family actually looks like." The financial restitution exceeded everyone's expectations. The federal asset seizure generated enough money to compensate every victim with full restitution, plus substantial additional payments for emotional damages. Helen received enough money to secure her retirement. Patricia was able to buy a house. David got his credit fully restored and received compensation for years of financial stress. My personal restitution was life-changing. $700,000 from my original inheritance, plus $400,000 in stolen funds, plus $2.3 million in penalties and interest. The money my family had tried to steal became the foundation for expanding my consulting business into a nationwide firm specializing in financial recovery for fraud victims. But the most important transformation was emotional. For the first time in my adult life, I belonged to a family that celebrated my success instead of resenting it. A family that supported my ambitions instead of making me feel guilty for having them. A family that chose to love each other instead of exploiting trust for criminal gain. 6 months after the trials ended, I received a letter in prison mail. It was from Madison attempting to justify their actions and asking for forgiveness. I threw it away without reading past the first paragraph. The family that had spent years stealing from me, lying to me, and trying to destroy me deserved nothing from me except the justice they had finally received. As I sit here today, exactly 1 year after that New Year's Eve text message that changed my life, I realize that my family's betrayal was actually the greatest gift they could have given me. Their crime exposed the difference between relatives who share your DNA and family who choose to love and support you unconditionally. So here is my question for everyone watching this. Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted was betraying you behind your scenes? How did you handle finding out that family loyalty was being used as a weapon against you? Share your stories in the comments below, because I know I am not the only one who has experienced this kind of family betrayal. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life justice stories. Share this video with anyone who needs to hear that it is possible to fight back against family financial abuse and win. Thank you for being part of my chosen family here on this channel. And remember, blood may be thicker than water, but justice is thicker than both. Sometimes, the best family decision you can make is choosing people who actually deserve your trust and loyalty.